Before we start working backwards from circumference, let's do a quick recap on how to calculate the circumference of a circle. You have two options for calculating circumference depending on what you know from the circle. One if you know the diameter, which is the full distance across, and one if you only know the radius, which is that halfway. So in terms of pi, it's not actually multiplying it by pi, so instead kind of showing everything else. So if my diameter is 53, I would be plugging that in for d in the formula. So the only difference between what I just wrote in terms of pi is in terms of pi kind of simplifies it and makes it look nicer. So you'd want to write your number first. So the circumference in terms of pi would be 53 pi. Again, that's showing that you would do 53 times pi, but it lets you kind of avoid working with the never-ending decimals that pi has. If you wanted to actually round that, you would do 53 times 3.14. This would give you a rounded decimal answer of 166.42. Now, if we switch over and only have a radius, the reason you multiply by 2 is because it takes 2 radii to make up a full diameter. So in terms of pi, I would be taking my formula of 2 times pi times my radius. Again, I'd want to simplify that up, so actually do 2 times 17 to get an answer of 34 pi. If I wanted to instead actually multiply those two out, I'd use 3.14 for pi to kind of automatically round it for me, and I get an answer of 106 76/100. So what this video is going to teach you is how to work backwards from circumference. So if we already have the circumference and instead want the diameter or the radius, how can we do that using what we know? If you look at this quick preview, you'll always start with the right formula, so what you're solving for, if I want the diameter or if I want the radius. So here in these first two examples, we want the diameter, so that means I'm going to start with c equals pi times d for each of them. Next, we're going to plug in what we know. So if we look here, I am given the circumference. So I'm going to substitute that value in for c in my formula. For 47.1 is equal to pi times d. And in this next one, I have that c is 18 pi. So again, making that substitution in for the formula. Now, sometimes you're also going to know what pi is, so if it wants you to use 3.14, so here I'm going to go ahead and make that substitution as well, and then times d. Now in this next one, notice it's in terms of pi, so I'm actually going to leave the pi symbol there. I wouldn't want to use the decimal since the circumference was not in decimal format. Next, step 3, we're going to be dividing. So think about an equation. I want that diameter by itself, and right now it's being multiplied by pi. So on both sides here, my step would be to divide by 3.14 or the pi symbol. Now in this first one, I have the decimal, so I'm going to be dividing by that to get my answer here. So 47.1 divided by 3.14, and that's going to give me an answer of 15 is equal to my diameter. Now in this next one, since I have the pi symbol, watch what's going to happen here if I divide by pi. Since I have the symbol both on the top and on the bottom, those are just going to cancel out. It's essentially saying multiply by pi, but then divide by pi. So those would cancel, leaving you with just your answer. So here it would be 18 is equal to the diameter. So if we kind of summarize these two, if it's in decimal form, I am actually going to take that number and divide by 3.14. But if it's in terms of pi, the only thing that's going to happen is those pi's are going to cancel, leaving you with the diameter. Next, we're going to do the same thing, but this time finding the radius. So since I want the radius, it would make more sense to use the formula that has the radius in it. So I'm going to set these up with 2 pi r. Again, starting with plugging in what we know. So I know circumference for both, so I'm going to go ahead and make that substitution in. And then again, kind of asking yourself what pi you want. So in this first one, we want 3.14 for pi, so I still have my 2, but I'm going to write 3.14, and of course I don't know r yet. And then for this next one, I'm actually going to leave the pi symbol there. Now from here, we start to think equations, so you want to start to work backwards. So in this first one, I like to kind of take it piece by piece, so I like to start by dividing by pi. So again, with the decimal, I am actually going to make that division. So 81.64 divided by 3.14. So that would leave me with 26. And if you look at what I still have 2 times r. So I need to do one additional step here of dividing by 2 to get my radius. Essentially what I have right now is the diameter is 26. So that means my radius would be 13. Next up, for the in terms of pi example, I still start off by dividing by pi. The difference is these pi symbols are just going to cancel out. So that would leave me with 28 is equal to 2r. So again, really 28 is the diameter. So dividing by 2 to get all the way down to my radius, and I would get 14 is my radius. So really the only difference between finding the diameter and finding the radius if you're given circumference is for the radius, remember to cut that in half as your final step. So work backwards, think like an equation, and good luck.